Most people think freedom comes from earning more, a higher salary, a better title, a bigger house. That's wrong. Real freedom begins much earlier than people expect. It begins around your first $50,000, not because the number itself is magical, but because of what changes once you cross it. I've spent my life studying how people survive economic cycles and how they don't. What I've learned is simple. Money isn't about lifestyle. It's about control, the ability to say no, the ability to wait, the ability to survive when conditions turn against you. I've always believed savings are the purest form of freedom. If you can cover a meaningful period of your life without income, you're no longer fragile. You're no longer dependent on the next paycheck, the next boss, or the next market move. You gain time, and time is the most valuable asset there is. $50,000 is often the point where that buffer becomes real. It's where a layoff stops being a crisis and becomes an inconvenience. It's where bad timing doesn't ruin your life. It's where decisions improve because fear stops driving them. And this matters more today than it has in decades. We're living through rising inflation, unstable job markets, geopolitical tension, and a global economic order that's changing in real time. Long term debt cycles don't end gently, they end with stress, restructuring, and surprises. I've seen this pattern repeat for centuries. In environments like this, people without savings are forced to react. People with capital get to choose. That difference between reacting and choosing is the difference between survival and freedom. Most people misunderstand what financial freedom actually is. They picture yachts, early retirement, or never working again. That's not freedom, that's a fantasy. Real financial independence is much quieter. It's the freedom to choose, the freedom to leave a bad job, the freedom to wait for a better opportunity instead of grabbing the first one out of fear, the freedom to absorb a hit and keep moving forward. Money in the bank isn't about showing wealth, it's about resilience. When hard times arrive, say, and they always do, the question isn't how smart you are, it's how long you can last without being forced into a bad decision. Movements like FIRE understood this earlier than most. Their core insight wasn't about retiring early, it was about saving aggressively and letting capital do the heavy lifting. Spend less than you earn, invest the difference. Build toward the point where your investments can sustainably cover your life. The math is simple. Around 25 times your annual expenses using a conservative withdrawal rate gives you independence. But before any of that matters, there's a much more important step. A step almost nobody talks about. Your first $50,000. This is where you stop thinking purely in survival terms. Below this level, every expense feels dangerous. Every market move feels personal. Every mistake feels permanent. You're focused on not falling backward. At 50,000, something shifts. You can think strategically instead of defensively. You can invest without panic. You can hold through volatility instead of selling at the worst possible moment. Opportunities that were invisible before start to appear, not because you're smarter, but because you're finally positioned to act. Psychologically, you no longer see yourself as someone who's bad with money. You've proven you can delay gratification, follow a system, and build momentum. Practically, your capital starts to matter. Returns become visible. Compounding stops being theoretical. This is why the first 50,000 is harder than the next one, and why crossing it quietly changes everything. There's a psychological pattern I've seen repeat again and again. People think saving gets easier when you earn more. In reality, it gets easier once you've already saved something meaningful. When you have very little, every dollar feels fragile. You respect it. You think twice before wasting it. And paradoxically, that mindset is what allows savings to grow in the first place. Once people cross a real savings threshold, they don't suddenly become reckless. They become protective. They don't want to go backward. That's why savings behavior isn't just math, it's identity. You stop seeing money as something that immediately escapes you. You start seeing it as stored time, stored options, stored freedom. The deeper shift is moving from earning to spend, to earning to escape dependence. Below 50,000, income feels like something you trade for lifestyle. Above it, income becomes a tool. Every dollar earned is no longer asking, what can I buy? But how much closer does this get me to independence? Most people never make this transition because they fall into predictable traps. Consumerism trains you to convert income into status as fast as possible. Financial illiteracy keeps people focused on monthly payments instead of total cost. Lifestyle inflation quietly absorbs every raise before it has a chance to build security. You don't lose the race to poverty in one big mistake. You lose it through small, socially approved ones, nicer cars, bigger apartments, upgrades that feel harmless but permanently raise your cost of living. Getting to 50,000 requires resisting those pressures long enough for a new identity to form. Once it does, saving stops feeling like sacrifice and starts feeling like progress. Reaching your first $50,000 isn't about a single breakthrough. It's about building a system that works even when motivation fades. The first step is brutally simple. Spend less than you earn, not occasionally, consistently. Awareness alone changes behavior. When you actually see where your money goes, waste becomes obvious. Most people don't have an income problem, they have a leakage problem. Small recurring expenses quietly drain years of progress. The second step is increasing earning power. Saving alone is slow. Income growth accelerates everything. That doesn't mean chasing hype, it means becoming more valuable, learning skills the market pays for, taking on side work, creating multiple streams so one setback doesn't collapse your plan. Every additional dollar earned has two jobs: improve your life slightly and push the rest toward freedom. The third step is removing emotion from the process. Automation is one of the most powerful tools in finance. You save and invest the moment you get paid, before willpower has a chance to interfere. Starting early matters more than being clever. Compounding rewards time, not intelligence. The earlier the system runs, the less effort it requires later. The final step is understanding investing at a basic, durable level. Broad index funds, diversification, long-term ownership of productive assets. This isn't about excitement, it's about survival across cycles. Day trading, constant switching, and chasing trends are how people turn good savings habits into permanent setbacks. You don't need perfect decisions. You need consistently non-stupid ones. Build the system. Let time do the heavy lifting. That's how the first 50,000 is actually made. I've always framed saving the same way. First, decide how much freedom you want, then calculate what it costs, and then save to that number relentlessly. Not because it's exciting, but because it works. Freedom isn't vague, it's measurable. How many months or years of independence do you want? How long do you want to be able to think clearly if income stops? Once you answer that honestly, the saving goal becomes obvious. $50,000 is often the first point where freedom stops being theoretical and starts being functional. The mistake people make is relying on feelings to get there. Motivation comes and goes. Fear comes and goes. Discipline built on emotion eventually breaks. That's why systems matter more than willpower. Principles remove choice from moments when humans are weakest. You save automatically. You invest systematically. You don't renegotiate with yourself every month. I didn't build Bridgewater by reacting to how I felt. I built it by designing rules that worked across good times and bad times. Personal finance is no different. If your plan only works when markets are calm and life is easy, it isn't a plan. This matters because money doesn't exist in a vacuum. It moves through cycles. Economies expand and contract. Debt builds and resets. World orders rise and decline. I've spent decades studying these patterns, and one truth is constant. People with liquidity survive transitions. People without it are forced into bad decisions at the worst possible times. Seeing money through a cyclical lens changes how you behave. You stop chasing short-term gains. You stop assuming stability is permanent. You build buffers. You respect risk. You prepare instead of predict. That mindset, saving for freedom, building systems, and respecting cycles, is what turns $50,000 from just a number into a foundation. The context matters. And right now, the context is unforgiving. Inflation quietly taxes people who don't have assets. It erodes purchasing power while wages lag behind. Holding cash without a plan means falling backward in real terms. That's why $50,000 today matters more than it did a decade ago. Not as spending money, but as strategic capital. It gives you options to protect yourself, reposition, and invest instead of merely absorbing losses. At the same time, job security is weaker than people want to admit. Layoffs are no longer rare events tied to recessions. They're ongoing features of a global competitive system.
Add geopolitical tension, supply chain fragility, and shifting alliances, and you get an environment where shocks travel faster and last longer. In those conditions, flexibility isn't a luxury, it's a survival strategy. People with savings can wait. People without savings are forced to accept whatever terms the environment imposes. That difference compounds over time, just like money does. Technology accelerates this divide. AI and automation are reshaping work faster than institutions can adapt. Some skills will scale dramatically, others will disappear quietly. Income volatility will increase, not decrease. And in a world where careers are less stable, financial buffers become psychological buffers as well. Freedom isn't just about money anymore, it's about adaptability. The ability to retrain, the ability to pause, the ability to step back and think instead of reacting under pressure. $50,000 doesn't solve every problem, but it buys you the space to solve the right ones. In environments like this, resilience beats optimism, and savings are still the most reliable form of resilience we have. I've seen this play out in very ordinary lives. No windfalls, no genius, just consistency. One person I spoke with spent years feeling trapped in a job they disliked. They weren't underpaid, they were overcommitted. Every dollar was spoken for. Slowly they built a system: automatic savings, controlled expenses, occasional side income. It took time, but when their savings crossed $50,000, something fundamental changed. They didn't quit their job. They didn't celebrate publicly, but they stopped feeling desperate. A bad meeting no longer felt like a threat. When a better opportunity appeared, they could wait for it instead of begging for it. Their decisions got calmer and better. The counterexample is far more common. People get close, 20, 30, even 40,000, and then undo it. Lifestyle upgrades arrive right on schedule.
A nicer apartment, a new car justified by, I deserve it. Income rises, but savings don't. Progress feels slow, so impatience takes over. The milestone stays just out of reach because spending keeps moving the finish line. What separates the two isn't intelligence, it's behavior under temptation. Once someone crosses 50,000, their relationship with risk changes. They stop chasing shortcuts. They stop needing validation through consumption. They start protecting momentum. Confidence grows, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing a single mistake won't ruin you, that confidence feeds better decisions. Better decisions compound. And over time, that first milestone becomes the least important number in the story because it unlocked everything that came after. Crossing 50,000 isn't the finish line. It's the moment the game actually starts. The next targets become clearer and more structured: 100,000. Then the number that represents true independence, the point where your assets can support your life without requiring constant labor. Each milestone matters less emotionally, but more mathematically. The system is already working. Now you scale it. This is where investing becomes intentional, not reactive. You think in terms of asset allocation instead of individual bets. Growth assets for expansion, defensive assets for resilience, liquidity for opportunity. Time horizon starts to matter more than headlines. You're no longer trying to win this year. You're trying to survive and grow across decades. Diversification becomes central, not because it maximizes returns in the short run, but because it minimizes the risk of being wrong at the wrong time. I've always approached portfolios with the assumption that I don't know the future, and neither does anyone else. So you spread risk across assets that behave differently in different environments. Economic cycles are unavoidable. Inflationary periods, deflationary shocks. Booms and deleveraging. The goal isn't to predict exactly when they arrive. The goal is to be prepared when they do. That means owning assets that perform under different conditions and rebalancing as the environment changes. At this stage, money stops being something you chase and becomes something you manage. The focus shifts from accumulation alone to durability. You're no longer just trying to get richer, you're trying to stay solvent, flexible, and in control no matter what cycle comes next. The first $50,000 isn't about wealth, it's about leverage. Leverage over your time, your decisions, your future. Before it, life feels reactive. You take what's available, you move when you're pushed. After it, choice enters the equation. You can wait, you can say no. You can think in terms of strategy instead of survival. That shift, more than the money itself, is what changes everything. This doesn't require perfect timing or special talent. It requires starting, tracking where your money actually goes, building a simple system, letting small, disciplined actions run long enough to matter. Not tomorrow, today. Time is the one input you can't replace once it's gone. Money by itself isn't the goal, it's just a tool. Freedom is the mind that tells you what that tool is for. Build the buffer, protect your optionality, respect cycles. That's where real freedom actually begins.